Welcome to Stories in Living Color. Here's our brilliant MC, Joel Ying.
Thank you, Emil. Welcome everyone out there to the 7th event of the Stories in Living Color project. It's produced by the Storytelling Association of California and by Rick Roberts. Yay, Rick Roberts. Thank you for bringing this programming out into the world. Today's theme is belonging, Asian American voices. And I'm excited to welcome you today, our audience, our tellers, everyone out there from all over the country. Rick told me that there are over 16 states represented, so you guys are zooming in from everywhere. Thank you for joining us. And today we're changing the program up a little bit. We usually have paired stories. And today it's a partnership with Asian American Storytellers in Unity, and we're going to present Asian American stories about belonging. So our program is titled Belonging, Asian American Voices, and it's because of Asian American Heritage Month, the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And all of us, you're all here because you believe in the power of story. And we believe that stories bring us together, bridges that gap of understanding between communities. Stories create understanding, empathy, connection. Stories create healing, and stories will create peace. Thank you for being here, because we cannot have storytelling without story listening. I'm Dr. Joel Ying. I'm a physician, educator, storyteller, and most importantly today, I am your MC. I'm zooming in live from Naples, Florida, and I am excited to introduce the other members, my fellow members of Asian American Storytellers in Unity. We're a group that meets online to support each other and to support Asian Americans in the art of storytelling. We have a diverse group, and we chat and we talk about what we're all doing and just support each other. And it's been really a great group to be a part of. And today we want to bring you a timely topic of our own personal stories. But to start us off, I'd like to introduce a special guest. Now, Lily Lee Naj is going to recite one of her poems for us. She's a poet, a storyteller, an artist, a social justice advocate, and she's only 6. What have you been doing with your life? Well, special thanks today for her #1 fan and her mother, Helen Lee, for sending us her poem. Please help me welcome to the stage for her poem, The Shape of Love, Peace, and Unity. The Shape of Love, Peace, and Unity, Lily Lee Naj.
Okay, so again, the name of my poem is The Shape of Love, Peace, and Unity. Love doesn't have a shape. She follows her own direction. Love may walk in a circle or in a straight line. Love may trip and stumble and fast. Love often will fall. But love is never alone. Love is awaiting your call. But love will help out her fellows and anyone that is in need. Love will offer a snack to everyone that's on Love's team. Love will sometimes get angry and even sound a bit mean. And when love gets really upset, love must make you want to scream. But love will sort herself out. So give love a pat on the back, or give love a break, or give love a good laugh. But love will help out her fellows, and anyone. Sometimes love will goes out to take a walk in the woods. Love must need time to herself to think and wonder and rest. But if you see love alone, be sure to stop by and say hi. Maybe share a piece of gum, or give love a high five, or offer a shoulder to lean on, or offer to give her a hug. Because that's what love would do for you. Of course, she would. She is love.
Yay. Give it up for Lily Leenaj.
Thank you, everyone, for spreading the love at this difficult time, and happy Asian Heritage Month.
Thank you, Helen.
We have a book too, if anyone is interested, on Amazon.com. It's called The Stories of Only Child's Mom from China to America by Helen Lee. And you can find us on Facebook too.
Thanks, Helen. You can put that in the chat as well.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Please also show your love for Lily in the chat and all of our storytellers. We can't hear your applause, but we can feel your love through the chat today. And our whole program today is about discussion, stimulating questions. And obviously, how can we talk about belonging without talking about love? So thank you, Lily, for bringing us all that love. And that love can be many things, including giving you a piece of gum, including being angry with you, right? But love does many things. So I do want to have a content warning for today. We have topics that are important to us, that are adult themed topics. You can't really talk about belonging without talking about not belonging. You can't talk about healing and peace without talking about where our wounds are. And so the stories tonight are going to talk about those wounds, and they will talk about the racial slurs that come up, the violence that might come up, as well as the hope and the healing that comes up. None of this is new. It's prevalent in the rising tensions in our country, but I wanted to give you that content warning. It may be time to put the kids to bed, but if the kids are watching, it is also time for that age-appropriate conversation to begin with them. And so watch it with them, please. This program is meant to create discussion, and so there is a Q&A button in this webinar for you to put all of your questions. Please type them in to any of our storytellers. We're going to have a few sets of stories, and after we'll have a panel, and we'll ask questions for a while and then bring them back at the end as well. So we'll have a couple panels in between for discussion, and we'll be entertaining your questions, so please put them in. Sometimes they get lost in the chat. If you want to put them there as well, just put in question. But if you really want them answered, put them on the Q&A button. Again, this is for discussion. We want to know, we want to create a conversation. We want to know what you're thinking, and we'll discuss them between the stories. So are you ready to start? Please help me. Woo! All right. And we love to know where you're from too. So if you want to type in where you're listening in from. All right. Our first set of stories, our theme's going to be finding where I belong, finding where I belong. Where do you belong? Now, our first storyteller is going to be Toby Anderson. Toby is a third-generation Japanese American, and she considers herself a third culture kid. What's that? We'll get to that. She's lived in many different cultural environments, different from her own, in the formative years of her childhood. And she's continued to travel in very different places as a Peace Corps volunteer, as an international school teacher in Southeast Asia. Toby has lived and trekked through many different countries across Asia and Europe. And from these rich experiences, she gathers stories to take you on a cultural adventure. She now comes to you live from Olympia, Washington, and her story today is called A Piece, P-E-A-C-E, A Piece of Bread. Toby Anderson, A Piece of Bread.
Thank you, Joel. My husband Brett and I worked in various international schools around the world, so our family moved around quite a bit. There was one country in particular, I would have to say, that when it came to diversity, it was like way on the bottom of their list. It was Halloween time, And this was a really important event for my daughter, Asia, who's 8 years old. So we went to a fabric shop that was located in this city. And the clerk was very nice. She helped us pick red buttons, green buttons, blue buttons. Asia wanted to be Ninja Turtle. So I had this tray of buttons and I'm in line to pay for it. And the cashier in front of me, she looks behind my shoulder and beckons for the woman who's in back of me to come in the front. And I thought to myself, hey, wait a minute, I'm first. And then I looked at the clerk, who just kind of looked at me and shrugged her shoulders. So I paid for the buttons, and we hopped in the car, and I was fuming. And I'm driving this little car back home, and I'm just spouting. It is so unfair. I am so tired of this. And of course, my daughter, Asia, she's hearing all this. She goes, oh, Mom, come on, Mom, calm down. Okay, you're right, Asia. Sorry. Honey, we have one more stop to make. I need to go to the gas station. So I pull up at the gas station to the pump. Now, in this country, very much like Oregon and New Jersey, you have an attendant that pumps the gas. So I pull up and I get out of the car and it is freezing. It's below 0 degrees Celsius. And I put on my wool cap because it is very, very cold. I get out and there is the gas station attendant. And he's in his green uniform. And I try to say in the host country national language, as fast as I could, which is preschool, I said, good evening. I hope you are well. Could you please fill my tank with gas? And then he looks at me and says, in the most condescending, mocking way, exactly what I said to him. And I just stood there, fuming. The tank is filled with gas. I hop back in the car and I am furious. This barbed wire around my heart gets really tight. And here it goes. Another experience I have to put in the back of my head. Well, let me tell you, that storage place is getting pretty full. So I'm driving away and, I completely forgot. This was the gas station. They had the little mini market and Asia loved to get these little Kinder eggs, which is a chocolate egg with a toy inside. I was so angry, I completely forgot about it. And all of these words, which are not very nice words, were bouncing all over the car walls and door and window. And poor Asia, oh, Mom, come on, calm down. It's okay. Asia, I'm going to tell your father I quit. I'm leaving this country. I'm going back to the United States. I am just tired of it. Oh, Mom, please calm down. It's okay. It'll be all right. Well, I got to say, I felt pretty bad. Okay, honey, look, we'll go to the village grocery store and we'll get you a Kinder Egg there. In fact, you can have 2 Kinder Eggs. I felt so guilty. So I go and park in the village lot and we go up into the grocery store. She gets her Kinder Eggs and I needed some bread. So I just grabbed the quickest loaf that was there, sliced bread in a plastic bag. And there we are, waiting in line to pay. When I feel this tick, tick, tick on my shoulder. There's this woman in this heavy gray coat. And she says to me, you don't want that bread? That's factory bread. Come! And she grabs my arm and she takes me to another section of the store, and there is a shelf full of beautiful baked bread. You know, the kind with that crusty outside and it flakes off? So she grabs a loaf and hands it to me, and I'm holding it like a baby. And she says, "My country is famous for its baked goods." And so here, Asia and I, we follow this lady, and you know what? The people parted way so I could get my own spot back. And then as I'm waiting to pay, this woman says to me, "Tonight, you will enjoy your dinner with your family." And that barbed wire around my heart slowly started to melt, and a thin bit of light started to go into that storage room that was so chock full of bad thoughts. This woman in the gray coat had no idea the impact she had on me that evening. The power of kindness. And you know what? We lived in that country for 20 years. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Toby. Thank you for showing us the power of kindness and finding belonging in a place where you're an outsider. Please give your love to Toby in the chat. And thank you all for logging on from such long places. I saw Georgia, Virginia, Florida, all kinds of states pop by. Continuing this theme of where do I belong, I'd like to bring up our next storyteller, Nancy Wang. Now, Nancy is a fifth-generation Chinese American. She started as a dancer and choreographer, and then she integrated all those skills into her theater company, Ethnotech, which she co-founded with her partner, Robert Kukichi Ngoho. I could do it. And they've been together since 1981 doing tandem stories, and they've received many awards. They've performed internationally, and they have a very unique style of storytelling, weaving movement, gesture, music, and spoken word, and you should definitely check them out. They have a program the last Thursday of every month. Check them out. But tonight, Nancy Wang is flying solo. She's reaching into her own treasure trove of personal stories to give us a glimpse of what it's like growing up in the South, Southern United States, as an Asian American. Please help me welcome Nancy Wang.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you, Toby, for your story. But I know I'm the dancer choreographer, but I'm just going to sit here and tell the story. So, but we do usually move. Anyway, my story. I am a Southern belle. What? I don't look like one? Well, let me tell you, I am, because I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. And as you can hear, I can quickly put on a Southern accent. And if you don't believe me, I even remember my address. 4420 40 Fontainebleau Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana. I am a Southern belle. I remember serving the French beignet donuts on a Sunday mornings at the French Quarter when I went to Sunday school with my red-headed friend, Tommy Lou Fisher, and her family. Her mother always smelled like a flower. I remember the Mardi Gras, all dressed up in a costume and reaching out for trinkets and shouting, hey, mister, gimme, mister, to the floats passing by. I especially remember freezing in my little ballet bird costume and ballet slippers. It was a cold 40-degree Mardi Gras that year. I was already a stubborn little girl. No, Mom, ballet slippers complete the outfit. Brr. I remember playing in the warm rain puddles with my bathing suit on after a southern warm downpour. I even remember with Tommy Lou mooning the cars going by as they drove along our street to the Sugar Bowl football game. We were probably all of 6 years old, mooning our tiny little butts. Tiny no more. I also remember while playing in front of my house, some boys on bicycles riding by shouting, "Chin Chin Chinaman!" I also remember not knowing where to sit on the streetcars because the whites got to sit in the front and the colored, meaning black, in the back. Where was I to sit? And what about the public water fountains and public restrooms when we went shopping downtown? The sign says either whites only or colored, and it was the same with the waiting rooms for the trains and the airplanes. Where was I supposed to drink, sit, go? Those days in my childhood were the beginnings of me being told that I was invisible, that I didn't count, and that if I wanted to be treated with respect, I'd better identify with being white. And I did. And I became a banana. Now, a banana is what we call an Asian who is yellow on the outside and white on the inside. I became a banana, doing my best to hide who I was, and the struggle for my identity began in earnest. I began to deny a big part of who I was. When I was out and about, I thought, yeah, I certainly feel as white as you all. Must be true then. But if I accidentally caught a reflection of myself in a store window, I was actually surprised to see that I didn't look white. Now that is crazy. Yet, the first time I went to China to find my roots, at the old age of 37, I was on a bus with my dad's family, and the wife of one of my uncles wanted to know that if I was the American relative, why didn't I have blonde hair and blue eyes? Now, is that crazy? Not really. This invisibility doesn't just exist here in America. It is exported around the world through movies, magazines, commercials, and advertising from an America that says, who is an American? Even politicians, when talking about diversity, will mention black and white, sometimes brown, but rarely yellow or red. It's a strange coloring system, but still, we have been made invisible. This denying of my own ethnicity is only because America does. Many of us have heard these words. Oh, I don't see you as Chinese. You're one of us, meaning white. But I don't want to be the other white. I denied being Chinese long enough. I won't go long being invisible as me anymore. Well, actually, we as an ethnic group in America have been very visible when it comes to racist violence. Since the day we came to this country for gold mining in 1848, there have been lynchings, murder by guns, our villages burned down, theft, driving out whole Chinese communities and put on a barge or a train to who knows where. All sanctioned and participated in by politicians, sheriffs, newspaper editors. There have been laws passed against just us. For example, the miners' tax in California was applied only to Chinese miners. Chinese were not allowed to testify in court against a white person. My family, on my mother's side, started the fishing industry in the Monterey Bay area in California in 1850. And one of the laws Monterey passed was no fishing allowed for Chinese during the day. Chinese women immigrating here had to first prove they were not prostitutes. And of course, there was the only ever passed immigration law against one ethnic group, the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, that lasted for 61 years. And the Chinese were not allowed to vote, own property, even if born in the United States or become naturalized citizens, for almost 100 years since we arrived here. There is a book, Driven Out, that lists all the laws made against the Chinese. A whole book. Once while I was riding on a ski lift above the mountain in Tahoe, I heard voices calling out. I looked around and saw a group of men, young men who worked at the ski resort. They were shouting something to me. I shouted back, "What?" They repeated it. I still didn't hear it. What? And finally, I heard them. "Do you have a slanted cunt?" I wish I had continued not hearing them. And now we are once again very visible as victims of racist hate. Horrible violence against our elders, against women, knifings and slashings, acid in faces, pushed down to the cement onto the subway rails, all unprovoked by cowards. But this time it is different. We are making our voices heard. This time we are making our faces visible in a way we've been waiting for this moment since 1848. To be heard and seen in a powerful way and with empathic allies. Marches and rallies, organizations publishing statements against the hate and support of our Asian communities, including President Biden publicly stating his abhorrence of the violence against Asians. He has earmarked monies at the federal level to support organizations fighting for our safety. Congress has passed a law making hate crimes against Asians illegal. Asians, we have been extraordinary citizens of this country. We have not been a destructive force in this country whatsoever. And even when we are violated, we do not take revenge. We here in America are a peaceful peoples. We have built this nation and its economy. We have contributed as artists, social workers, teachers, lawyers, scientists, librarians, administrators, workers. We will no longer be invisible when we declare our visibility, but on our own terms. No more negative stereotypes. Many of you here are our allies, and I thank you all for being here today, seeing me, hearing me, and most importantly, listening with your heart. With your help, we will not be the invisible minority or the silent minority anymore. This is an American face, and I am speaking up loudly and proudly.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you for that timely and powerful story of finding belonging in a place where you're supposed to be belonging, but being the other. And thank you all for the comments as well. And again, questions for Nancy, put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat and we'll collect and we'll have some Q&A time for discussion. Thank you, Nancy. Our next storyteller is going to be Emil Guillermo. Now, Emil is an award-winning journalist, commentator, humorist, has many different titles, and he's a former host of NPR's All Things Considered. He is many, many, many things, and one that I found in common with him recently is we both graduated from Harvard. Wow. We meet somewhere.
Alums.
Alums. He's done solo performance in many shows, many storytelling shows. He's first and foremost a journalist, but he's also an incredible storyteller. He hosts a daily show on Facebook Live at 2 p.m. Pacific. Find him online, Emil Amok, A-M-O-K. And you will find him telling stories day and night in his inimitable style. Please help me welcome for Filipino Arrested, Emil Guillermo. Emil Guillermo.
Thank you, Joel. I'm looking at Cup Foods, you know, the convenience store, that place in Minneapolis where the awning says organic milk, t-shirts, and more recently, you could add a hard knee to the back of the neck. The police cars are in front of me. A white officer has his knee on the neck of a black man. I've never been to Minneapolis, but Darnella Fraser and her video, 929, took me there. 9 minutes, 29 seconds, not survivable. I would have given that video an Oscar because, yes, I can relate to George Floyd. He's big and a threat and scary. You say, no, me, they can swat me away. Yeah, I'm just a Filipino guy, an Asian American Filipino, an AAF Asian as, but I fill up a Zoom box. In court, Darnella Fraser testified when she sees George Floyd, she sees her father, her brothers, her cousins. Me too. Especially me. I see George Floyd. I see my dad. He was never arrested. He just suffered arrested development. He was on a boat from the Philippines to San Francisco in 1928, an American national. The Philippines, was colonized, no green card necessary. But in America, he found no jobs. White men fought him for jobs. And since the men were here to work, to be labor, Filipino women stayed in the Philippines. But Dad had to date white women. And white men fought him over that too. And then the government helped out, made it illegal for my dad to marry white women. And then they made my dad an alien, like he was from Pluto. Small, no longer a planet, hardly in our solar system. Uranus still is, but not Pluto. Isn't that a dog name? My dad couldn't own land, couldn't have a family, couldn't vote. America, land of the couldn'ts. My dad's arrested opportunity. That was his life, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. There's a lost generation in there. And then somehow my mother arrived and I was born. Finally. I didn't get arrested myself until just a few years ago. I was in all places, Kentucky, outside of Cincinnati. Technically, I wasn't arrested. They called it detained. It's not an arrest, but the difference is subtle. The fact remains, I was not free to leave. And if I tried, I would be resisting something and maybe shot. Oh, I give them an excuse, right? If I ran away, I can hear them now. Your Honor, he ran. He resisted. I shot him. Your freedoms are robbed when the police officer has a gun, and you don't. You may have a reasonable facsimile, say a black cell phone. That's not a gun, but with a camera, it could be your only defense. So here I am in the airport in Hebron, Kentucky, trying to rent a car. An incompetent manager didn't know the special code to make a change in my reservation. I'm angry. My consumer rights fight quickly becomes a civil rights one. He tells me to wait. He came back with two sets of policemen and their squad cars. The flashing lights are off. They're ready to do battle. They see a Filipino at the corner of the rent-a-car place. They were just airport cops, but the badges aren't. They weren't tin. And the guns, they're real. They were duly deputized to shoot me at their discretion. All four of them. I asked them, well, what had I done? Was I under arrest? They said I wasn't. Sure felt like it to me. Then again, I wasn't in a chokehold. They did want to see my ID. They could have said, let me see your papers. And I would have shown them a slightly worn USA Today. But I didn't. I was brown. And then again, they could tell by my non-accent that I didn't sneak in over the border, the Ohio River, and that I probably could have read the New York Times if I could find one around there. The situation went right up to the line. I could sense that any false move I made would be misrepresented. Maybe seen as a threat, or in their eyes, seen as disorderly. At that point, I was the only uppity Filipino there, possibly a Chinese man, or maybe, as they would say, an Oriental. It was 4 versus 1. And besides, they had guns. Their interpretation wins. Of course, I could have refused to give them my ID, but what would that have accomplished? Raise suspicion of my knowledge of freedom in the Constitution? So I handed it over. My California license, the one where my middle name is Amok, A-M-O-K. That must have gone over big. But I asked again for clarity. Was I under arrest, officer? The officer said no. Then they escorted me to the squad car where I sat in the back of the cage. And I sat, and I sat, and I sat. Turns out it was my taxpayer-paid criminal justice Uber. See, I wasn't arrested. I was detained, then removed, and dropped off unceremoniously at another rental car place. That memory came up when I was watching the Chauvin trial and all the video evidence that they showed. One shot showed George Floyd in the driver's seat, approached from behind by an officer pointing at him with a gun. I could see George Floyd's face, his hands up. It's a land of one false move with no room for the truth. One false move. No way to live in America, but I know that place too. For a few minutes, I felt it again. Here's the truth. All people of color have been under someone's knee in this country. It's our common ground, our shared racist past, our inherited historical trauma of one false move. That's why when I see George Floyd, I see an Asian American too. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we are together. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. And thank you, Emil, for that story. And I would like to bring everyone back up from this set of stories of belonging, where I belong, with Toby and Nancy. And we'd love to have some of your questions, but I'll start us off with some questions as well. And Toby, I know that you call yourself a third culture kid, and I was curious, tell us a little bit about what that is and how it affected your sense of belonging now that you're in the United States.
Thanks, Joel. Well, third culture kid is a term which means someone who grows up in a culture not of their own. And when I was young, I grew up in Japan because my dad was with the State Department, and then we moved to Malaysia. So that's two other cultures that was ingrained in me, even though I am third generation Japanese American. So that's what it means. And many students who go to international schools overseas face this, especially when they go back to their home country. Now I've lived in the US and Olympia, Washington for 10 years, so I do feel that this is my home. So basically, that's what it means, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. Nancy, I'm really struck every time I hear that story. Every time I hear it, it just is just as powerful as the last time. But when you say this is an American face, really catches me. And that scene of where do I sit on the bus, and all of those places where you are just not even seen. I'm wondering about your sense of belonging. Like, how did that progress through the rest of your life?
It took a long time and years of therapy. And what really also helped was my roots trip back to Asia. I went through Asia and traveled on my own for 6 months, the backpack on my back. And I interviewed different different Chinese people in different Asian countries and asked them how it felt to be Chinese in these countries and what it was like for them. And comparing it, of course, to what my experience was in America. And of course, theirs wasn't as bad because the Southeast Asia culture is close enough. I mean, there were things, but it was very important for me to do that trip. And then, of course, when I came back, the Asian American arts movement was happening, and I got sucked right in and began to do all my work with my art about Asian Americans. And as a psychotherapist, for some reason, too, when I came back, having found my roots, most of my clients became Asian American. So it was really combination of many things.
Mm.
And I'm not a banana anymore because I have an Asian husband now.
Oh, fantastic. I love that you threw the banana in the story. And I'm curious about your art too. I love that you, as a psychotherapist and a dancer and a choreographer and so many different things, that you combined things to become, to start Ethnotech, which is not just a performance group. It's really a group that does so much more. I was wondering if you could tell us.
Yeah. So beyond just, I mean, first of all, we choose mostly Asian folk tales from the various Asian countries, which are so many, because we felt it was important to show that Asians have a culture. We're not just whatever they put, as you call it, box, not just a box that they put us in, and that we have a culture with the same messages, the same values, and plus it was important for people to see, these kids mostly, to see Asian faces on stage that were not a stereotype. There's so many stereotypes about Asians. So that, but then eventually we began to do much more. We began to build the bridges of East and West. We took storytellers from America to Asia, to China, to India, to South Korea, to Singapore, to meet the the storytellers of those countries. Yeah, the Asian tellers of those countries. So that there was again a bridge building. We did salons for all artists for free. They would come to our space and they would perform and bring their own audiences, and they would share audiences that way. We did, and we started doing personal stories, not so much about ourselves, but about our ancestors or someone who was an inspiration, like Takashi Takamura, who was an atom bomb survivor and at age 8, but came to America and was very angry and vengeful, but we tell the story of his journey to forgiveness. So things that just inspired that all the different ways that Asian Americans are, that we're not just in one little box that they'd like to put us in. So we're hoping to keep building bridges that way, celebrating diversity.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really powerful to see yourself reflected out there, which is something you didn't have. So I think that's
no, not at all. No.
Yeah, I called myself a coconut back in my day. Bananas are too yellow. Coconuts were brown enough, and I ended up getting kind of shredded, though. Shredded. That's not very good. So yeah, today is the day that a year after George Floyd was killed, and I was going to change my story and do something else, and I thought, oh, this is something. Today is the day that George Floyd was murdered.
Yeah.
And it's been 1 year, and I did a show today talking about what has happened, and not really a lot. I mean, they they convicted Chauvin, the officer Chauvin, of three counts of murder, but we still have the powerful forces of labor, police unions to fight to get the real reforms. And just as an example, I lived in Oakland for a while, worked in Oakland. Oakland had a settlement agreement to put out 31 police reforms in 2003. They are still working for very basic reforms, 31 reforms, still working to this day, 18 years later. So 1 year, we say, where are we? What's the progress? We have some, but we have a long way to go. And one of the things that I try to do with my stories is to show that when we show common empathy, when we show a sense of unity, not just among Asians, but among all Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we can endure the length of time it will take to get to the kind of equity we want to see, or the kind of change in policing that we want to see. So, you know, and I know Nancy's a psychotherapist, and I will say this, I have dealt with the issues of my race trauma by meditating. And meditation and mindfulness has not only helped me with dealing with my personal race traumas. I mean, there are a significant amount, you know, being Filipino in America, you know, the son of a colonized Filipino, but it's helped me understand, it's helped me gain empathy, and it's also helped me create and find better stories. So.
Thank you, Emil, for your stories. And thank all of you for your stories. And we'll bring you back at the end as well, showing us how the very different places, the very different ways that we can struggle to find belonging, and the different struggles that we have in this country. So thank you all. And
Thank you, Joel.
thank you, guys. We'll bring you back. And if you have more questions for them, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. They'll be back at the end. Our next set of stories, we wanted to put them together in themes, and the sense of belonging across generations is something that comes up. And so our next storytellers are going to take a look at that issue with their stories. And our first storyteller in this series, in this set, is going to be Bowen Lee. Now, Bowen is a fifth-generation Chinese American who came to California in 1848. She was born and raised in Oakland and now lives in the Monterey Bay area, close to where her family also was in the Chinese fishing industry. She's been a teacher for more than 35 years, a writer, an illustrator, and very recently, she says, a storyteller. I'm sure it's not that recent. Many of her personal stories come from her family history, and today she's going to tell us about that generation gap. Her story is The Lemon Seed Tree. The Lemon Seed Tree. Please help me welcome Bowen Lee.
Thank you, Joel. I didn't come in 1848. My family did.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yes. You look very young, though.
Thank you. Well, it's April 21st, the day before Earth Day, and I'm looking for materials for my lesson plans for tomorrow. And I come across this story about a woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize because she planted trees. And I think about my grandmother. It's April 21st, it's her birthday, and she would have been 110 years old. She only died 4 years ago at 106, but for the first time since she died, I miss her. It's not that we didn't get along, we did, but in Chinese families, you're supposed to respect your elders. And I did respect my grandmother, but I didn't have respect for her. She was very grumpy all the time. She was always complaining and she was frustrated. I remember when I was 4 years old and I went to the corner grocery store to go get something that she needed. I brought back a box of butter and she picked up the box of butter and she said, "I told you to get a cube of butter. What am I going to do with all this butter?" Well, to me, you use the butter. I'm a baby boomer and I was born in a time of plenty and prosperity. But my grandmother, she went through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. She was very frugal. And she would come home from work and there would be this house full of people, kids running all over the place and screaming and crying. Those were my cousins. And adults having drama. There were 3 families living in our household: my family, my uncle's family, and my grandparents. And my grandmother had moved out of Oakland, Chinatown in a single family home to have a nice American home. And here it was, 3 families living together under one roof, 11 people. It was like she was back in Chinatown. She would go out into the garden. That was like her sanctuary. She liked to grow things. When my grandfather divorced her, she didn't have a yard in her apartment, but you could tell where she lived. At her front door, there was this profusion of potted plants. They spilled out onto the walkway and down the stairwell and into the parking lot. Down by the parking stalls, there was this huge container with a lemon tree in it. And this is the story behind that lemon tree. When she would go to a restaurant, she would order not coffee, not tea, just hot water. And if it was a Western restaurant, they couldn't understand what she wanted, like just hot water to drink. So they would put a slice of lemon on a saucer to give to her. Well, one of these times she picked up the lemon slice and she took the seeds out and she put them into her napkin and she folded it up and put it in her pocket. And then a few weeks later, she showed me this little pot with a seed growing out of it. She said, "I grew this from a lemon seed." And as the tree got larger, it went into bigger and bigger pots until finally it was in a big container by the parking stall where it got the most light. And she would be picking lemons off to give to the neighbors. How did she do that? My cousins always made fun of her because she was kind of peculiar in her ways, and they would make fun of her and crack jokes and giggle, and my grandmother would giggle along with them, but she knew that they were making fun of her. My grandmother was a very smart person. She was valedictorian of her high school, but she never went to college because at Oakland High School, that's where they piloted the SAT tests, and they did it on Chinese kids. So they could make sure that the SATs made it not possible for the Chinese to go to college. They had it culturally skewed so that only white people could understand what the test was about. My grandmother never passed the SATs, but she couldn't have gone to college anyway. She was a woman, she was a girl. She turned out being a grocery store clerk and later a secretary. And if she had gone to college, she could have done so many things. She liked sports and she was really good at it, but the boys wouldn't let her play on the teams, even though she was good enough to do it. She had to join all the girls' teams: basketball, girls' softball, girls' volleyball. When she played against professional tennis players, they said she was good enough to be a pro. And she played tennis until she was 93 years old. She wouldn't run around the court, but she would stay in one place. She'd hit the ball and place it just where you couldn't get it. How did she do that? So I'm looking at this material about this woman who won a Nobel Peace Prize, and I'm going, oh, you know, how does this remind me of my grandmother? She was kind of feisty when she got older. She stopped playing tennis, but she played Wii bowling at the senior community center, and she was on the TV news, and she bowled 3 strikes for the camera. How did she do that? And she was really feisty in her old age because they had to slap a bracelet on her, you know, the kind that sounds the alarm if you go out the door, because she would sneak out the back door of her assisted living place and go across, jaywalk across 6 lanes of street with her walker so that she could get a burger and fries. Well, she never won big awards. She did, she had lots of trophies for Texas Hold'em from the senior community place. And she only grew that one tree that I knew of. But who can grow a lemon tree from a seed? I don't know anybody who could do that and then share the lemons with her family and friends. I wish that I could talk to her now. And what I would say to her was, you were so amazing. And I get it. I understand why you were so grumpy all the time and why you complained about everything and you were so frustrated, because you had been excluded your entire life. If you had been born a son instead of a daughter, or a boy instead of a girl, or a man instead of a woman, all the things that you could have done. You were a Chinese person at a time when the white majority ruled and just shoved Chinese people off to the side and tried to squelch them down. And they never allowed you to have that American dream. And I know that you love that American dream. You had that American dream in your heart. You wanted it for yourself. You wanted it for your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren. My goodness, she lived to 106. She was outlasted everyone in her generation. When I come across a barrier, it's her voice I hear. Oh, they won't let you play? Well, you can go find something else to play. There's always something else. Oh, they won't let you go there? There's other places to go. They won't let you do that? Don't worry about it. You just do the best that you can. Do something that nobody else can do, and it'll be fine. And you know, she's right.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bowen. Thank you for introducing us to your amazing grandmother. I love stories about grandmothers, and thank you for letting me hear her voice now when I reach any obstacles. Oh, please give your love to Bowen in the chat. Wow, I already see lots of love coming out and lots of grandmother love. It's something that I think stories that always speak to everyone. And across the generations, I want to bring up our next storyteller as well, who is MJ Kang. Now, MJ is a wonderfully talented, accomplished, amazing, I could go on, but playwright, actor, storyteller. She was born in Seoul, South Korea, and her family moved when she was only 2 years old to Toronto, Ontario, and she now lives in Southern California. I love the many little details of things she belongs to. She's an actress in theater and been with many different festivals and troupes. And I love that her improv troupe is called Killer Kimchi. Wouldn't you like to watch them? Killer Kimchi. Well, most importantly, she's been in many story slams, won many story awards, and here giving one of her slam stories. another important fact, just so you don't get in trouble. MJ, her husband, her daughter, they're all qualified black belts in Taekwondo. Be careful.
Yeah, we're third-degree black belts. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Harbaji and me, MJ Kang.
I am 4 years old and on the small yellow school bus on my way home from kindergarten. I look out the window and I see my Harbaji, my grandfather. He's standing outside the condominium we live in. He's wearing sunglasses and this gray cardigan sweater with 2 deep pockets full of candy for me. When the bus stops, I make sure I'm in the front of the line. I want him to know that he is so important to me. I run down the stairs and I grab Harbaji's hand. Harbaji, let's go to the park. No, Myungjin, we have to go upstairs and feed you lunch. Otherwise, your mother will get mad at me. But first, and I look at him and he looks at me and he motions for me to put my hand in one of his pockets. And I take a piece of candy and I unwrap it and I eat it. And then we go upstairs to the 4th floor of our condominium where he has laid out for me pap, which is rice, kimchi, which everyone knows, and a bunch of side dishes with nori or kim to wrap everything up in. And he sits beside me as I eat. He's still wearing sunglasses, but I start hearing some light snoring. So I eat quietly by myself. And when I'm done, I nudge him awake. Harbaji, let's go to the park. And so he puts on his shoes and we run down the stairs. Well, I run while he walks behind me slowly. And we get to the park. And I go on the swing while he walks right past me and he sits underneath a tree. I walk up to him. Harbaji, what's the point of going to a park if you don't push me on the swing? Myungjin, now come and sit down beside me. And so I do. And I love feeling his warmth and hearing his breathing. And suddenly I hear snoring again. He's wearing sunglasses, so I look underneath them and his eyes are open. Harbaji, come on. We came to the park so you could push me. Myungjin, come and sit down and I'll tell you stories. Stories about Korea. I don't want to know about Korea. It's where you're from. I'm Canadian. Myungjin, you're always Korean first. And I think about this. No, I'm Canadian. If I'm Korean Canadian, then I don't really fit in. Myungjin, you'll always be Korean Canadian. It makes you special. And then he tells me stories about his life, my parents' life, how they got engaged after only a month of dating, how our family stories, and how they miss us. Harbaji, do you miss Korea? I do, very much. And now I am 7 years old and I'm coming home on the large yellow school bus from school, and I'm with my 2 older sisters, and Harbaji still takes us to the park and he still tells me stories. And then I start noticing that he's getting a little sad and he starts getting into fights with my mother. And one day I walk by his room and I see him packing. Now I'm at the airport and Harbaji is going to get on a plane back to Seoul, Korea. Harbaji, will you promise you'll come back, please? I promise, Myungjin. 약속? 약속. Myungjin, when you get home, look in the drawers. And I do, and I find them full of candy. Unfortunately, Harbaji never comes back. When he lands, he ends up having a heart attack and he dies soon afterwards. But his stories, those stories are still inside me. And I share them with my daughter and I share them with others because it's so important for me to keep on telling his stories so he's still living inside all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, MJ. Thank you. Wow. Thank you for that beautiful story, bringing us your grandfather.
Next time I'll do some taekwondo.
Oh, yeah. And I love how your 4 years old comes out. You just embody 4 years old, and really makes me adore you and your grandfather even more.
Oh, thank you. My daughter says, unfortunately, she's the adult.
Well, I want to also bring back up Bowen. Thank you. This sense of belonging. One thing I appreciate about both your stories is that you went back and looked into your family history. And there is one thing that gives us that sense of belonging, is that talking to our grandparents, our parents, getting their stories. And those are some things that you guys did. And I was curious, I'll start with Bowen. When did you collect this story, and how did you feel after you learned all this about your grandmother?
It is very, very difficult to talk to Chinese families in particular about their stories. They just won't tell you because it's been a hidden story. So I interviewed all of my grandparents before they passed when I was younger. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it. And what I found out was not all that much that I thought was important. But, and so I don't know where all this, I don't know where all that information is anymore. All that I have left is what's in my head and what I remember from what they said. And that's what I have to piece together my stories about them. So yeah, they, and I understand that, you know, there's some things that could I tell my daughter things about my life? It's like, oh, well, maybe not. So they were very guarded about their history. So, but trying to piece together, and all the other members of my family are helping with that. So we're putting we share our stories together, and that becomes the collective of what we remember.
Oh, beautiful. And how did you, like, what got you to start to collect that story, and how did you feel having put this one together?
I have an amazing family. I have a family that did so many things and have been in the United States for so long. I have no past with China at all, because I don't even know where we come from. And so people are trying to figure that out. Where were our roots in China? We have no idea. And so my history as a Chinese person is here in the United States. So, you know, that's an important thing to try to piece together. It's important for me. It's important for my family, and it's important for the rest of the world to know about. They contributed a lot. And so it's part of what I've taken on for part of my mission in the rest of my life, to try and piece it together.
Oh, beautiful. And to also, the stories show that you are such a part of this country, you know, with your history, your family's history is such a part of this country. So beautiful.
Yeah, they really were.
Wow. MJ, how do you, as you looked for this story and story of your grandfather, I do find I love looking into the history of my grandparents, and they're passed now too. And I have that same feeling of, I couldn't get their history from them, but I got it from other family members, or at least pieces of it. I'm curious how your grandfather, you know, his sense of belonging and how that translated between you and the next generation.
I think So, one thing that my family always does is we like to tell each other stories because that's kind of the only thing we had. You know, when we came from Seoul to Toronto, we didn't really have that much. And we had pictures and stories. And sometimes my parents weren't so forthcoming. And so what would happen is that my sisters and I would make up the stories. And they had to, like with my parents, they had to like correct us because otherwise we'll like say, you know, like crazy stories about them, right? Like, so, but it turns out that my parents and my family certainly had a lot of. I mean, they grew up during the. My parents, both my parents, grew up during the Korean War, and they saw Korea thrive in some ways, but also lose everything. And so that sense of, I mean, I grew up with being raised very traditionally Korean. That it was very important to always know that sense of Han, you know, generational guilt that we carry, and to always remember your past and future generations, and never forget, kind of. And you know, what is it like? Very like I don't know, in some ways ethnocentric, which is not the best thing. So maybe it was a really good thing that we moved to Toronto because then we were surrounded by every nationality, and so that was a really good experience growing up in that way.
Yeah, that sense of belonging between the generations, I think, is really quite fascinating. How first generation, second generation, third generation, and how that evolves. Yeah.
My daughter does say, you know, that she's full Korean, she's full Polish, she's full Syrian, you know, like she claims all of her identities. And I love that about her, that it's not, you know, it's not like I'm half this, quarter, you know, it's who she is. And she has learned Hebrew, and we're also Jewish. She has learned Korean, and she's also on her own learning ASL. So she has this need to learn languages and to understand and to communicate in different ways that's suitable for her, and that's important too. And I didn't want her to have, like, I had baggage growing up of not wanting to be Korean in some ways, and she doesn't have that. And I'm like, this is great. So in that way, I didn't want to pass on any of my, I mean, we all have issues. And I don't want to pass on my issues to her. So she's a much better person than me in many ways.
Oh, well, thank you both for sending on the stories to the next generation. It's really, really, really beautiful. That sense of belonging you give.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Joel.
Yay. Owen and MJ. They'll be back. Put in your questions. I'd like to move on to the final story for the evening, and we want to bring up the topic of that sense of home. I remember someone asked my dad once, "Where is home?" And my family is from Jamaica. My parents were born there, but we're also part Chinese, and so they've been there many generations. So really, I'm Jamaican. Lost other connections, and I was really curious what he would say because I never thought to ask him that question. And he said, "Home." After thinking a while, "Home is wherever I am." And then he said, "Home is here when I'm here with my family. Home is in Jamaica when I'm with my family. Home is in Canada when I'm with my family." And I realized, like, my dad, family, I've had so many homes. I've been so blessed with that sense of home in so many different places. Even though at times I didn't feel like I belonged, I always had a home. So where is home for you? Our next storyteller is going to be Bonnie Gardner. Hi, Bonnie.
Hello.
Now, Bonnie is a former journalist who changed careers to go into IT. And now I'm happy to say she is a storyteller. Yay! Welcome, welcome. She was in the 2021 Women's Storytelling Festival. She's been on Better Said Than Done. She's been here. She's been there. She's been an artist standing strong. She's been everywhere. And she also says when she's not at her day job, she helps to run Big, Big World Project. What's that? A nonprofit group supporting children into orphanages in Vietnam. She's now based in Northern Virginia, and you'll hear more about all of that. I was on a program, or listening to a program of stories, and I heard her tell the story of her adoption, the adoption of her child from Vietnam. And today she's gonna tell you a story called You Can Go Home Again. Bonnie Gardner, You Can Go Home Again.
Thank you. From the day my husband Ray and I adopted our son Owen from an orphanage in Vietnam, we always knew we'd bring him back to visit. It just took us a little while. For one thing, he proved to be a rather energetic child, and we weren't so sure that, on that long plane ride back, we wouldn't be handed parachutes and told to get the hell off. But more than him being able to handle the flight, we had to wait until he was able to handle the trip. Now, I've talked to a lot of adoptive parents. I've gone on a lot of online groups, message boards, and I know that taking your child back to their birth country is not a trip to Disneyland. The kid has to be ready to emotionally handle it, or else you'll get there and things can go south really fast. Was he going to have a lot of survivor guilt when he saw how poor the orphanage was? Would being back open up grief for losing his birth family? And would he just be inconsolably upset if he was expecting to be, to fit right in, and then realize he doesn't speak the language or really know the culture? But in 2018, when he was 12, we decided it was time. We'd seen for the last few years a pretty scary rise in white nationalism. We're a white family raising an Asian child, and if there's one thing we know, it's that we'll never be able to do enough to give him the sense of racial identity and pride that he needs. He needed to connect with Vietnam. And we had a great opportunity to go. I serve on the board of this very small nonprofit that supports kids in Owen's orphanage, the ones who won't be adopted. We take care of their educational needs, and including paying for college or trade school, so that when they age out of the orphanage, they're able to support themselves. Every year, a couple board members go back for a few weeks and do program delivery. And we decided that 2018 would be our year to do the trip. Now, our first day in Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City, we kind of have a free day because we're not due at the orphanage till the next day. So our whole group decides to do this day tour of the Mekong Delta. And our little nonprofit has about 6 kids at the time that we were putting through college. And one of our college students, FAP, decides he's going to come with us, which is great because his English is very good. We won't need to rely on our facilitator. She can do trip stuff. So we get to the Mekong Delta, and this tour, it's incredible. It's, coconut candy factory, horse-drawn carriage ride, feed the alligators, do honey tasting at a farm. And at one point, they funnel everybody on all the tours down this very narrow path through the jungle. And we're walking along, and then suddenly the path stops at the Mekong River. And 12 feet down on the river, it's just clogged, congested with sampans, these flat bottom canoes. And there's a woman with, in each one ready to row us to the next stop on the tour. So Ray climbs down this 12-foot ladder and gets in a sampan, and then I come after him so he can help me in the boat. But my idea is that way I can hold on to Owen as he comes down the ladder, because there are no life jackets. But the minute I set foot in the sampan, the woman starts rowing. And I'm like, oh my God, I see my kid growing smaller and smaller in the distance. And I'm freaking out. I'd been so worried about, could he emotionally handle this trip, that I forgot to worry about, am I going to lose him in the Mekong Delta? But I see him get into a sampan, and then I see Fap get in with him, and I'm just praying Fap will hold on to him, he won't fall in the river, and that somehow when we get to the next stop with all these tour groups, we'll be able to find each other again. And sure enough, we get to the next stop and we climb up the rope ladder, and there's Owen and Fap waiting for us. I guess the woman rowing their boat was in better shape than ours because they beat us. And then halfway back to Saigon, I think I finally exhale, because I look in the back of the van, and Owen and Fap are just chatting, and they're like best buddies having a good time. And I think, okay, he's okay. Day one went okay. Well, but the real test is going to be tomorrow, because we'll be at the orphanage. We'll be completely dependent on our facilitator to do translation for us. And, it could be tougher. So Ray and I go over our plan that we set several months ago. If we get there and the orphanage is it's just overwhelming, you take him back to the hotel. I'll stay and do the official duties. We get to the orphanage and we just hit the ground running. It's one thing after another. We take the kids to the dentist, clothes shopping, meet with the government ladies, and I don't have time to check in to see if Owen's okay. But then at lunchtime, I see him. He's sitting with the kids and they're laughing their heads off. And I walk over and they're passing his phone back and forth. He didn't wait for our facilitator. He downloaded Google Translate, and they're typing in Vietnamese to English, English to Vietnamese, and having this wonderful time. And that's how the whole trip went. The week at the orphanage, Owen and the kids found a way to transcend language and just be kids together. And then in Saigon with our college students, well, once Ray and I showed them photos that we took when we adopted Owen when he was about 2, and photos of themselves at the orphanage when they were tweens, they all remembered him. I used to carry him around. I used to play with him. I remember feeding him. Just like that. He was back to being their little brother. Now, one of our last nights in Saigon, we all went out to karaoke, and with the college students and the whole group. And, I looked over at Owen, nestled into the couch, Fap on one side of him, one of the other kids on the other side, belting out Highway to Hell, of all things. And I thought, why did I ever worry about how he was going to handle this trip? I'm an adoptive mom. I know that it's not DNA that makes a family, but this trip back to Vietnam made me see family in a whole new way. It's tragedy and trauma that brings kids to orphanages, but these kids had found a way to build loving and lasting bonds with each other, and they welcomed my kid home. After karaoke, we were out on the sidewalk and I was trying to get the nerve to cross the street. Now, if you've never been to Saigon or seen the many YouTube videos, the traffic is really something. Just picture motorbike after motorbike after motorbike, maybe 14, 15 abreast, an occasional truck or car, but they just come one right after another. It's relentless. It never stops. And what you're supposed to do is just step out and they'll flow around you like water around rocks. It's terrifying. And I'm trying to get up my nerve. And Owen pulls on me and says, "Hey, Mom, can I go for a ride on the back of Fap's motorbike?" And I look at Fap and he's holding out a helmet. And I look at the Saigon traffic and I just say, "Don't stay out too late." And he climbs on behind Fap and they wade into the river of motorbikes and get smaller and smaller. And I'm not worried at all. I know he's going to be okay. Why wouldn't he be? He's with family. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it home, that sense of belonging. He's with family. What a powerful, beautiful ending, that sea of motorbikes. I can still see it. Oh, um, I'm curious how your son, how he views when you ask him about this trip.
Oh, it was just the best time. He did so many different things. And, thanks to social media, he has friends forever now. I mean, obviously we will keep going back as much as we can. But in the meantime, there's Facebook and, there's the ability to share photos and keep in touch with the kids.
Hmm. That's so beautiful. He has a second home.
Yeah, absolutely. A second home there with a great group of kids that are just good friends.
Mhm. I wanted to bring everyone back on stage, our storytellers, and just have a little open panel for a little bit. Maybe we have questions for each other, or see if the audience had any questions there.
Bonnie, has your son gone back to Vietnam on his own?
No, he's only 14. So, yeah, one day I'm sure.
Bonnie, you actually look Hapa.
You're not the first person who said that to me. Thank you.
So it was like when you said, and we're a white family, I went, you are?
Helen, I'm curious how Lily came up with that poem.
It was a very emotional story. We are a blended family. 8 races: Hungarian, Polish, Chinese, Jewish, Austria, German, and some native. So it's a very like a little UN Lily herself, seeing herself coming from all these races. But the family from my side, it's mostly Mandarin Chinese, even though I live in Asia and Europe as well, but I'm more like a fourth cultural child because I came back and forth in between culture, and Lily's dad and husband's family has never been to Hungary, mostly Hungarian, but I, kind of encourage their family to do root searching. So I feel it's the root and wings we give to children, but home is really where your heart is, and that's where love rests. But how do we really define that unconditional love? It's almost treating love as a child, and coming in between all these cultures. And I feel sometimes, as a family, we're like the characters in the poem love, like Lily said, because we are a unit as a family, but sometimes we feel left out, lonely, and feel angry. So
Sorry, Lily, I think you have 2 computers on and we're getting some feedback.
oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So
Thank you for figuring that out.
thank you for the comments, because sometimes I lost touch of the technical part. So I think sometimes it's really hard to really define what really unconditional love is until we really put love there as a character. So Lily often share with us how she feels at that moment, and then she say, this is how my love will show up right now, but it is love. It's it's but pretty mean and angry, but it is still me. I'm still
Thank you, Helen. We have to sort of wrap up now, and we have one more question as well.
Okay,
and I wanted
so I
to
just
bring
wanted
it
to
to
give some background.
I want to bring it to Nancy. Just to, someone out there asked, how can we be better allies? So. Oh, you're muted. And where did Emil go? Oh, there you are, Emil.
There you go. How can we be better allies? I think it's a question for all of us. I think, when you hear something racist, speak up. Of course, be safe, but stand by us. If you see something violent happening, make sure that you're filming it, or that you're going to help that person move away from the situation. Education, educate your kids, your friends, have discussions. Please, anybody else? I mean, allies are really important for us because we can't do it by ourselves. No one can. So, anyone else have a good thing to say? How to be an ally? Listen to our stories, share our stories.
Take martial arts like MJ. That helps. You could do that, but I have learned that I've learned to become more empathetic just by seeing people who may not, who may come at you really hard. It's like you understand that we are from the same source and we have more in common than we don't. That might get you in trouble somewhat, but if you're standing with others and if you have a way to publicly shame people's actions when people see how aggressive they are to you, sometimes that can be an answer. But I think once I think it has to start with us sometimes too. I want to be the more aggressive person to say, yeah, let's go get them. But I think if we come up and embrace, it's very Christian, it's very Far Eastern, right? Love your enemy. It's a message. It's the hardest thing, but it may come in handy now.
So one reason why stories are so important, and the stories that we've been telling, is because it's about connection. And so, for such a long time in this country, there have been stories of disconnection, trying to break us apart, making others of other people. So connect, just like, please, let everyone know that they are a part of one big family. We're one big family. Find the connections between people instead of trying to push people away or trying to say, point fingers. So we are all human beings, and bring out the human being in people. And yes, speak up, but speak up with a piece of peace bread, like Toby did, so with kindness and
compassion,
and showing that we share just so much in common.
It's important also is to have these kind of conversations, and they always talk about the race conversation. But one thing that I've noticed is that before we can have these kind of broad race conversations among all different people, I found that for me, I had to have the race conversation with myself. How did I feel toward others? How did I feel about aggressors? How did I feel about the kind of trauma that I had in my past? And once I had that conversation with myself, I was able then to tone it down and be more open and be more empathetic. And as Bowen said, if you tell stories, the stories are the bridges, right? You tell a story, someone hears a story, tells a story, and then we meet halfway and we understand the universal part of the stories that bring us together.
We had another question come through about what you'd like to see in Asian American movements in terms of what's next. And I'll leave that out there. I'll say that I would like to see more storytelling. And also I would like to, I really appreciate the stories. I know MJ had to go, but also Bowen, the stories of family, like going back and getting those families from the previous generations, because there's a long history in immigration where we don't talk about those stories. We don't pass those stories on. So
Yeah, yeah, of course it's important to know where we've come from so we know where we are today and where we're going. But, racism, prejudices start when people are kids, when they're young, when they're vulnerable and open to whatever is around them. So, Joel, why don't you tell them about Storytopia?
oh yes, the Asian American Storytellers in Unity, we have a project called Storytopia, and you can find it on the YouTube channel. Maybe somebody will type it in for us, where we have some sample episodes, but it's targeting the K-5 population and introducing the Asian American stories from Asian stories and Asian American stories, and projects and
Activities, fun activities, interesting activities, and great stories from our different cultures, folk tales, and hopefully more personal stories like lunchbox stories going to school. And yeah. So it's going to be a series of 10 to 12, maybe more, if we can just keep going. But we will be launching the whole thing soon, although you can already see 2 series. They're only about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's a way of getting kids to see these are American faces and that we are fun. We're not just these scary, weird people. And then our stories are universal in terms of message and values, and makes us human. And that's what we need to continuously let people know. Hello, we are human.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so true. And I think this can be included in the school community and for the K-12 curriculum reform, which today is I think Illinois is the first state that include Asian American history in the K-12 curriculum already. They just passed that bill. So hopefully next California, Massachusetts, New York can all implement Storytopia. I love that name very much. And also
Asian American Storytopia. Yeah.
Okay, great. I will pass along to the school too. And also I think it's very easy to become the victims of bias, even at your own home, in blended family, talking about conversation of racism, with yourself, but it's really start with yourself and then your home. I have friends, myself, included, sometimes your own family can be a very, very dedicated, kind of unique place that you have to really come in terms with the definition of bullying and discriminations. And then, you can expand from there. I think it's a very, very hard battle, sometimes internally.
so I want to thank everybody for tuning in, everybody in the audience there, all of our story listeners for being such amazing, amazing audience. And once again, a big shout out and thank you to our storytellers, to our young poet, Lily Lee, who may have gone to bed, and her mom, Helen Lee, as well as Toby Anderson, yay! Nancy Wong, yay! Emil Guillermo, woo! And Bowen Lee, yay! And MJ is not here, but we're gonna go, yay! She had to run off to another show. And wrapping us off with that sense of home, beautiful story, Bonnie Gardner. Thank you for your beautiful stories. And
thank you, Joel, for our MC. And thank you, Richard, Rick Roberts. And thank you, Andrew, for all the tech help, and Emil.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.